Hi, hello, it's Nikki and welcome to my messy bookshelf. Today I'm here to talk about the 5 hardest books that I've ever read. And this is sort of a tag video, and it was created by Paul at the Accidental Bookseller, and I was tagged by Alan at Big Hard Books and Classics. So I have really been enjoying watching everyone's take on this topic, and I was very excited to be tagged in this because I thought it would be such an interesting conversation. But I realized that I'm finding it a lot harder than I thought I would. Looking at my shelves and looking at Goodreads and seeing all the books that I have read over the years, it's really hard to narrow down. So with this tag, the rule is that it has to be a book that you have finished. And I also believe that you're not supposed to choose a book just because it's boring. So trying to come up with books for this topic, like I said, I struggled a little bit. And ultimately, I did come up with some books that I feel that were difficult for me because of how they made me feel. There is one, and I will talk about this one first, that was a bit boring for me, but that is not the only reason why I found it so difficult, and you will see what I mean. So I will get into the 5 books that I chose. So, like I said, this is the only one that I thought was boring, but it's not the only reason. So the first one I have here is the Epic of Gilgamesh. I thought I was ready for this book when I read it a few years ago. Well, I think it's like over a decade now. And this is an epic ancient poem. I believe it's one of the oldest examples of fiction in existence, the oldest known example of fiction. And I thought I was ready for this. And this book, I struggled. I really struggled with it, partly because I was bored, partly because of the translation, and partly because I didn't understand the context of this. I thought I would. I was a history major back in those days, before I dropped out. And I thought that I would get through this no problem, but I struggled with it so badly. I didn't understand why they were doing what they were doing, why they were saying what they were saying. I couldn't connect with anyone. I couldn't really understand their motives for what they were doing. And also it was missing fragments. So it was not complete, at least this translation that I read. So I struggled through this. And I think that I would like to return to this one now that it's been a few years. And something else is that it is a poem. And poetry is something that I struggle with. I do struggle with poetry, and it is something that I want to get better at and dive deeper into because I am not a poetry person. I like things to get to the point. So I did struggle with this. The prose, the translation, the context, all of that stuff. So this is the only one like this in my collection or my selections that I have here. The next one I have is one that is very popular, and I actually did really love this book, and it's The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This one, I think that I found it very difficult. First, I found it difficult because it was hard to tell who was talking when because there's no quotation marks. It just goes. I found that I actually got into it though, as I kept going. For me, I think that this plays on a secret fear of mine. The subject matter is very difficult. There is a post-apocalyptic, bleak landscape, and this man and his small son are traveling to, we don't know where. We know that it's the coast, and we don't know why they're trying to get there, but it is very bleak. It is a man alone with his child, and he is the only one to protect his child. And I think that there is a theme here for me with difficult books in that I do not like to see children suffer. So what is going to happen to this child if something happens to him? all of the people that they meet during their travels, the depravity that happens or could happen and would likely happen in a situation like this. Not knowing where your next meal is going to come from, just trying to get somewhere because you think that there is going to be, you know, a light at the end of the tunnel. All of that plays on a secret fear of mine. I mean, I'm a borderline prepper, okay? So yeah, it's a fear that I have always had. I mean, what would we do in that situation? How could we ever trust people again? And what would happen to my children if something like this happened and something happened to me or my husband? So it really, really scared me. And made me feel a lot of things, made me think a lot. I have continued to think about this book in the months since I finished it, which was last year, the end of last year. All right. The next one I have here, okay. This one made me feel that I was not enough of a reader. So this one is a very popular book, and it's Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. And I could not stand this book when I read it. I did finish it. I could not stand a single person in this book. All of the characters were vile, but it's such a beloved book. This book, I wanted to stop reading so many times, and I kept thinking that there was something wrong with me as a reader, and I started getting very self-conscious because I was wondering, what is wrong with me, and why do so many people love this book, and why don't I? And after many years, I think I read this over a decade ago, I think this is a book I would like to return to. Now that I realize that I am kind of a character-driven reader, I realize I didn't like it at the time because all the characters basically suck. And now that I realize I can accept that and just enjoy the writing for the beauty of it, I would like to return to this one. But yes, this book really shook me as a reader because I didn't understand why I wasn't enjoying it and why it's such a beloved classic, and I just could not. I could not. I finished it. I hated it when I read it. I hated it. So there is that. Oh, something else with this book. A lot of the suffering in this book, I feel like, is because these people are acting or behaving in ways that is making them their own worst enemies. And that is something I have very little patience with. So in books, I want to shake people and scream at them, why are you acting like this? Why are you doing this? So that is something else that I struggled with. So moving on. The next one I have here is not a classic, and I didn't want to just talk about classics. This one was one I read recently as well, and it's The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. And I mean, many of you have read this book and probably wondering why I'm adding it to this list, but for me, I am very empathetic, and I hate to see or read or hear about people that are suffering. And there were moments in this book that were so gut-wrenching to me that I was weeping. I wept multiple times while reading this book, like ugly crying while reading this book, and just seeing how evil humanity can be towards other people. And the scenes with children being snatched from parents and parents being shipped off in carts, and literally gut-wrenching to me. And it left me a sobbing, weeping mess at the end, I will say that. So that is why I chose to add this one to here, to this list. Subject matter is just awful. And then the last one that I added to my list is one that I actually unhauled because I knew that I would probably never read it again. And that was Lolita. And this is another one that made me feel self-conscious as a reader, but that is not why it was so difficult for me. I think most of us know that that book contains a lot of graphic content with an older man and a young girl. And so many people have tried to tell me it's not about that, it's about the unreliable narrator, it's about Nabokov's beautiful writing. And yes, he did have a very beautiful writing style. And sure, there are other elements to the book, and he does have a knack of making you feel almost sympathetic. He turns this person into a sympathetic character, and that made me feel very uncomfortable because the subject matter was so awful and vile, and one of the worst things I can imagine. Harming children and harming animals is something that I cannot handle. And making a sympathetic character out of someone who did that to a child, it was very difficult for me to get through. So, yeah. Lolita. I'm glad that I read it. I understand what people are saying when they say that it is about more than just the subject matter, but the fact remains that that stuff is in there. And it was very difficult for me to read that stuff, especially being a mom of a young daughter. And I won't go any deeper than that. But yes, those are the 5 books that I chose to be my 5 hardest books that I've ever read. And there were many others that I considered choosing, but I think these, because of the visceral reaction that I had to all of them, and how difficult it was for me to move on to another book after each of them, that is why I chose these books. But yeah, I thank you so much, and I will tag some other friends below, but I thank you so much if you made it to the end of this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care.